For it. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Daf Yomi. Welcome to the show. We're going to start with, we're going to be doing Daf Pei Hey today, page 85 of Maseches Pesachim. But of course, we never start at the beginning. We always jump back a little bit. So let's just, it might just help us to not review necessarily the whole of yesterday's stuff, but just have an idea of what we're talking about. We read in the Mishnah yesterday about the concept of breaking bones. You see, when you were eating the Korban Pesach, you had to eat it in a very respectable way. We were free, and so there were requirements that came alongside that with how we should make sure that we are eating. And one of the things that we're not allowed to do is to break the bones to be able to, to suck every last drop of juiciness or of marrow from these bones. So that was a problem. We were not allowed to do that. And the Mishnah told us that you could get lashed for breaking the bones when you were going through your Korban Pesach. But then it continued to say that if you were to leave them over, or if they were impure and you broke them, then you would not receive lashes. And yesterday, the Mishnah, in the context of talking about breaking bones, was trying to get to the bottom of, how would we describe what they were trying to get to the bottom of? They were trying to get to the bottom of, I'm just going through my notes over here, why it would be that in one instance you would get lashed, if in another instance you wouldn't get lashed. And it brought 8 possible cases in which to understand the practical difference between, one second here. So we were exploring a concept yesterday that anything that was fitting to be eaten, excuse me, anything that was fitting to be eaten was subject to this prohibition of breaking the bones. And if it was not fit to be eaten, then it would not be subject to the prohibition of breaking bones, which is why if something was tameh, or if it was left over, then it would not be, you would not be lashed for eating for breaking the bones. But if it was fit to be eaten, if it was your normal Korban Pesach, let's say, then you would be liable to lashes if you broke those bones. And the Gemara went through 8 possible cases to explain what the difference between these two opinions is. And in the context of that conversation, we had encountered a statement which we're going to come to today. We're going to start from today, which is 6 lines up. It's 6 lines up in the Pei Daled Amud Bet on 84b. So that's where we are starting from today. So we've been talking about the statement by Rabbi that if there was, this was separate to this. So we'd also seen a statement by Rabbi which had said that if there is a suitable amount of food, of meat on a bone, which is a kazayas, an olive's bulk. So if there was an amount of meat on this bone where you were breaking it, then you would be subject to the prohibition of breaking it. And if there was not a shiur achila, if there was not the requisite amount of meat on this bone, then it would not be subject to the prohibition of shvirat etzem, breaking of the bones. So that's where we were up to yesterday. Now, the prohibition of breaking the bone applies to a bone that has an olive's bulk of meat on it, or an olive's bulk of moach, of marrow, in it. For those of you who know Hebrew, moach is the word that we give, in modern Hebrew at least, to the brain. So the marrow, I guess, is like the that main essential substance of bone. So that was Rebbe's position. The Rebbe's position is the prohibition applies when there is an olive's bulk of meat or of marrow attached to this bone. And according to the Chachamim, then the prohibition applies even if there's not a kazayas, an olive's bulk of meat on the bone at all. So now we're going to see a machlokes, an argument with regards to this point. So that's where we're going to pick up from. And I haven't put it on the screen, have I? Come on, Rabbi Nick. Pull yourself together, man. Here we go. We've got it on the screen over there, and we've got it on the screen over here. So let's have a little go at this. Are we ready? 1, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. So the Gemara says, Itmar, it was stated. Okay, stated on yesterday's stuff. We glossed over this concept, and now we're going to explore it. Aver she'ein alav kazayis basar. If you have a limb, if you have a bone which does not have an olive's bulk of meat on it, b'makom zeh, in this place, v'yesh alav kazayis basar b'makom acher, but it does have an olive's bulk of meat in a different place. Okay, so at the place that you're breaking the bone, it does not have an olive's bulk, but somewhere else, it does have an olive's bulk. Then there's a machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says, yesh bo mishum shviras eitzim. You are going to encounter the prohibition of breaking this bone and be subject to lashes. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish amar ein bo mishum shviras eitzim. Reish Lakish, or Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, says that there is no prohibition here of breaking the bone. You're not going to be violating the prohibition, and so there's not going to be lashes. To which, however, Rabbi Yochanan is going to refute and counter this. Eisavei, says the Gemara, over here. Eisavei Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Objection, Your Honor, said Rabbi Yochanan to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. It says in the verse, Ve'etzem lo tishbruvo, that the bone you should not break. Echad etzem sheyesh alav kazayis basar, ve'echad etzem she'ein alav kazayis basar. So Rabbi Yochanan deduces from this verse that it makes no difference whether there is an olive's bulk of meat on it or not. My ein alav kazayis basar. What do we mean that he would say that it doesn't that it would apply even if it doesn't have an olive's bulk on it? Ilema de ein alav kazayis basar klal. If you want to say that there's no meat on it whatsoever, there's no olive's bulk of meat on it whatsoever, why would Rabbi Yochanan say that it's subject to the prohibition of breaking the bone? Clearly, there must be something on it. Otherwise, it's not it's not meeting any threshold of biblical quantity. Rather, this is what it was coming to say. Whether it has an olive's bulk of meat, of flesh, on the place where you're breaking, but also if you were breaking the bone at a place where there was no kazayis of meat, however there is a kazayis of meat elsewhere on the bone, then according to Rabbi Yochanan you're going to be encountering a problem. The Gemara says, Kashila Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. This, however, is of difficulty to the opinion of Reish Lakish. Why is it of difficulty to the opinion of Reish Lakish? Because Reish Lakish had said that it's not subject to the prohibition of breaking the bone. So Omale, he said back to him, Lo hachi ka'amar. No, this is what it was trying to say. Echad etzem sheyesh alav kazayis basar mibachutz. Whether there is an olive's bulk of meat, flesh, on the outside of the bone. Ve'echad etzem she'ein alav kazayis basar mibachutz, v'yesh alav kazayis basar mibifnim, b'makom shevira. But, so whether there is a kazayis of meat on the outside, or whether there is a kazayis of flesh, of edible substance on the inside, i.e. the marrow, you are going to be violating the prohibition. To which the Gemara asks, so, hang on a second, we have a Baraisa, Vehatanya. The verse says, Ve'etzem lo tishbaru bo. The verse says, a bone you shall not break. Echad etzem sheyesh bo moach, ve'echad etzem she'ein bo moach. It doesn't matter whether there's marrow in it or not. The verse only said that you can't break bones. Says the Gemara. Uma ani mekayem. So how do I establish the mitzvah that's written in this verse? Va'achlu es habasar balayla hazeh. That they shall eat the meat on that night. So continues the Gemara. Babasar she'al gabe ha'etzem or eno ela babasar shebetoch ha'etzem. Is that coming to talk about meat that is on the bone, or perhaps it's talking about the marrow that is inside the bone? Umani mekayem. So then, how would I establish ve'etzem lo tishberu that you cannot break the bones? So then you'd be able to say ve'etzem she'ein bo moach, that it's talking about the bones that do not have marrow. You can't even break those. Aval ve'etzem sheyesh bo moach shorev ochel. But if it was a bone that did have marrow in it, and you wanted to get to that marrow, then the Torah would be allowing you to be able to do that. And don't be too surprised that what you've got here is a situation where you are violating a lo ta'aseh, you are violating a negative mitzvah, because the aseh, the positive mitzvah of being able to eat it, is pushing it away, it's overriding the negative mitzvah. Keshahu omer, so when it says ve'etzem lo yishbru bo, that the bone you should not break, but Pesach Sheni, it was talking about the Korban Pesach that would be brought at Pesach Sheni, she'ein tamid lomar, where there would be no need for the verse to state explicitly. Shahari kvar ne'emar, because it's already said kechol chukas haPesach yasu oto. The same way that you did the first Korban Pesach, you should do the second Pesach, Havei Omer, which would mean echad etzem sheyesh bo moach ve'echad etzem she'ein bo moach. That whether it's a bone with marrow or whether it's a bone without marrow. So I think where we get to is a challenge where we are saying that you can't be eating bones with marrow. Whether it's Korban Pesach Rishon, Korban Pesach Sheni, it wouldn't make a difference. The point here is that our baraisa that we're bringing as a proof is indicating that the position must be that you can't be eating these bones. You can't be breaking these bones either, even if there is marrow inside. So Mesaveh, the Gemara is going to raise an objection to Reish Lakish's view, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish's response. Ever shiyatzom miksaso, if you have a limb that had protruded beyond the boundary of the Beis HaMikdash, so it had been carried out, and once it starts to pass the threshold of the Har HaBayis, it's going to become immediately impure. So it's bringing a challenge from the following, it's literally the following Mishnah, because we're going to see it shortly as well on the other side of the page. But if a limb of an animal, of a korban, is protruding even slightly beyond the threshold of the Beis HaMikdash, so the Mishnah says, Chosech ad makom shemagia le'etzem, you should peel back the flesh until you get to the raw bone. V'kolef ad shemagia le'perek chosech. Is that right? No, sorry. You should cut back the flesh until you reach the bone, and then you should peel it back until you reach the joint. And once you've reached the joint of this limb, then you should cut it off. But if you wanted to rely on this this distinction, that a limb that doesn't have an olive bulk of meat on it, but it does have in a different part, so Reish Lakish had said that if you have a limb which does not have a kazayas at the point at which you're breaking, then it would be okay to break. But then that poses a problem for this next Mishnah. Why would I need to start peeling back bits of flesh until I reach the joint? I just need to peel back a little bit and then break the bone, because there's not going to be any prohibition of breaking the bone. So why are we going to all of this trouble? So Abaye Omar Mishum Paka, Abaye says, no, the reason why we do this is because the bone may crack. So where you are breaking it at, it may start to crack, and then it will crack towards a part of the bone that has got meat on it. Ravina Omar, Ravina says, however, Bakulis, it's talking about the thigh bone, and the thigh bone has a lot of marrow inside it. So even if you're peeling away the meat, you're still going to be breaking the bone in a place where there is a lot of edible substance. So the Gemara continues now. Tanan Hasan, we learned over there. Ha-pigul v'ha-noseh v'ha-tameh. If you have got pigul, which I believe we may have explained previously, but pigul is a korban that you're not allowed to eat, and the reason why you're not allowed to eat it is because when it was slaughtered or processed as a sacrifice, the person who was processing it had the wrong mindset, and so it earns this status of pigul, and you're not allowed to eat it. Big problem for someone who eats it. So if you've got some pigul, or you have some nosar, you have a korban which was left overnight, or it was impure, v'hatame, in the brackets over there. So the Gemara says, metame nes hayadayim. We decreed on these types of korbanos that they are going to transfer impurity to anybody who touches them. Your hands are going to be tameh if you touch these items. Rav Huna v'Rav Chisda. So there seems to be a machlokes about this as to why this is the case. Chad amar mipnei chashdei kahuna. One of them says it's because we had to impose this stringency because of priests who we are suspicious of. Are we going to be nervous that Kohanim are going to start purposely rendering these korbanot pigul or nosar? Are we concerned about that? If we are, then we have to impose this tumah on people who touch it. And the other one said that the reason is we're concerned about lazy priests. We're concerned that priests are going to purposely leave things over. And so to avoid the situation of lazy priests, we're going to tell them that if they have meat korbanot that are left over overnight, it's going to transfer impurity to their hands. So mar masni apigul, mar masni anosa. One of them was saying we are concerned about suspicious kohanim, and that is why we are strict about pigul. And the other one was talking about nosar, leftover, but lazy kohanim is a problem for nosar. Mandu masni apigul mishum chashedei kahuna. The one who was teaching about pigul said the reason was suspicious kohanim, that they may start getting up to all kinds of tricks. So let's make it difficult for them by telling them that they're going to be impure if they do it. And the one who was teaching about leaving it overnight, that was because of lazy kohanim. One of them taught that the required amount to transfer this impurity is a kazayas. And one of them said that the required amount has to be a beitza, an egg's bulk. The one who said that it's the amount of an olive bulk, he held that position because it is like its prohibition, meaning that one violates the isur, the prohibition of eating pigul or eating leftover sacrificial meat when they're eating olive's bulk. And the one who said that the required amount is a beitza is because that is how much you need of food to be able to transfer ritual impurity. So asking on this, Ibai lehu, Yotzei Gazara Rabbanan Tuma Olo. Did the rabbis decree this similar concept of declaring things to be impure? Did they extend this to items that get taken out beyond the threshold of the Beis HaMikdash? So that these sacrificial items were supposed to remain inside the boundaries of the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara is asking whether Rabbanan extending this decree to items which are taken outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Do we have to try and prevent that? Do we say that with regards to leftover meat, so we had to decree over there so that the Kohanim would not be lazy about it. But with regards to sacrificial meat being taken out, we're not concerned about this. The reason why we're not concerned about this is because it would require someone to actively take it out. Okay, meat that gets left over overnight, you just have to ignore it. Meat that gets taken out, someone has to actively take it out. So maybe the sages, the chachamim, did not extend the decree to something that requires active taking out. So lo mafkile b'yadayim. Lo. Oh, sorry, yeah. So aval yotzei afuke b'yadayim lo mafkile b'yadayim lo gazru bei rabbanan tuma or dilma lo shah. Or do we say that it makes no difference? So do we say that because it requires the active taking out that it would have been extended, or do we say it makes no difference? Tashma. So the Gemara suggests, come in here. Eva shiyatza miktaso, a limb that is partially taken out. Chosech ad shemagia le'etzem. We cut back until we reach the bone. The kolef ad shemagia le'perek v'chosech, and then we peel back the flesh until we get to the joint, and then we cut it off. V'yomar gazru bei rabbanan tuma. But if you want to say that the rabbanan did extend the decree of tuma to this type of situation, ki chasich le'mai have. What difference is it going to make if you if you're if you are cutting it off? Hakamatami, it's already impure, and the kohen is already impure. Tumas. So the Gemara answers, tumas sasarim he, but tumas sasarim lomatamia. So the Gemara answers that we're dealing in a case of tuma, of ritual impurity in a concealed place. What does and when it comes to tumas sasarim, when it comes to ritual impurity in a concealed place, they do not transfer and contract tuma further. So what does that mean? The part that's gone out would impart ritual impurity to the portion that has not gone out due to the contact they make underneath the skin, which is concealed from view. Okay, so I think what this is saying is that it's not going to spread the impurity to parts of the bone which are still covered up. And so actually it doesn't keep transferring the impurity. Whereas normally we're used to things, entire objects becoming impure once they have a status of impurity. But I think what this is saying here is that it is going to make a difference if you cut it off, because parts of this bone won't have yet reached a state of impurity. Ravina da Amar, but according to Ravina, who said Chibure Ochlin Lav Chiburu, who said that that Chibure Ochlin, and when it comes to things that are connected, foods that are connected, they're not considered true connections for spreading the tumah. Uchumam demiparti dami, and they are considered like they are separate. My ikalamema. What then would you be able to say in that instance? Ha kanaga bahadade bekam matame. They are clearly touching each other, and so the tumah should be spreading. So the Gemara answers, Ela leman demasne kazayis deleisbe kazayis. So according to the one who was saying that it requires an olive's bulk of meat, so then the case where we're saying that you can peel back the flesh and cut it off is dealing with a situation where there is no kazayis. Uman demasne kabetza, and the one who is teaching within the world of the size of an egg, the Leis Lekaveta is saying that the Mishnah is addressing a situation where there is not the required amount of flesh, according to the one who says Beitza, egg. Tashma. So now we come and explore this from another angle. Hamotzi basar pesach mechabura lechabura. A person who is removing meat of a korban pesach from one group of people and is taking it to another group of people, afar pi shehu b'lo taseh, even though he is violating a prohibition of moving from one part to the other, tahor, the korban pesach nonetheless remains pure. Why is this? Lav tahor va'asur deyotze mechabura lechabura kiyotze chutz mechitzas otami mafsil. Is it not that the meat is remaining pure, but it's forbidden to eat it because of the concept that a korban pesach that goes from one group to another group is comparable to any korban that goes out of its boundary, and it should be disqualified. Vafilu hachi katani tahor, and even so, we're teaching that it's still pure. So therefore, we can see from this piece of evidence that the Chachamim, the sages, the Rabbanon, did not decree impurity on parts of the korban pesach that are removed from the place where they're supposed to be. Lord, the Gemara says no. Tahor umutar, it's pure umutar diyotze mechavura lechavura, it is pure and it's still permitted to be eaten. And the reason for that is the diyotze mechavura lechavura, meat that gets transferred from one group to another. Lav kayotze chutz mechitzas dami v'lo machzil. It is not considered to be like a korban that is being taken out of the confines of the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore it is not disqualified. But hang on a minute. The end part, the latter part of the Baraisa said, one who eats it is going to be violating a biblical prohibition. This will work according to the opinion who said that the required amount has to be an egg's bulk. Because you could be dealing with a situation where there is a olive's bulk, in which case you're not allowed to be moving it around, but there was not an egg's bulk. So an egg's bulk is bigger than an olive's bulk, and so you could be violating the prohibition of eating it, which is an olive's bulk, but you may not have caused it to become impure because it didn't have an egg's bulk. But according to the one who said kazayas, what leg do they have to stand on? You're going to be violating the prohibition of moving it from place to place, and there's going to be an issue of tumah over here because he says, that opinion says, that you only need an olive bulk. So rather, what we have to say is as follows. When it comes to taking out a korban pesach from its place, lo mebayalan de lo gazru rabbanan tumah. It's not required for us to say that the rabbanan, that the sages did not decree tumah on it, because that is obvious. My timer, why? What is the reason that they did not need to decree that it should be ritually impure? Because b'nei chavura's reason here, because people who are in a group of a korban pesach are going to be very, very careful and meticulous to make sure that everything stays above board. And so they will caution anybody who is in danger of violating any of the prohibitions associated with the korban pesach. Ella, however, so when were we asking about this? It was only with regards to taking out sacrificial meat, other types of sacrifices beyond their boundaries. And what would the halacha be? So the Gemara very interestingly says, teku. Not entirely certain. The matter remains unresolved, which is, I can't think that we've had too many tekus in our Sunday morning shiurim, but we have certainly had them so far in the 3.5 Masechtas that we've covered. But sometimes the Gemara reaches a point where it is unable to resolve the issue based on the traditions and based on the information that it had, and so that has all kinds of interesting ramifications when it comes to practical applications in Jewish law. But for this point in the Gemara, that's where we have to leave that particular question, that it remains unresolved as to whether it's only with regards to sacrificial meat. As we turn the page onto Amma Beis, the Gemara continues, and Motzi Basar Pesach, when it comes to carrying out meat by the Korban Pesach, Mechavura Lechavura, Minayin, when it comes to transferring meat from one group, right? Perhaps we didn't say this clearly enough before, but Chabura is the group of people that have registered for one Korban. And so you can't be going between two different groups of people with the wrong Korban Pesach.
Well, so from ask a quick question about the word registered, because that's come up a few times. What does that actually mean in the context of this?
People would have to sign up. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a Google form or booking in on K2, but people would have to declare which Korban Pesach they were going to be eating and which group of people they were going to be associated with for the mitzvah of eating the Korban Pesach. And once you were locked into that group, so if it was before the sacrifice had been done, then you could still transfer. But once you've done that sacrifice, you are locked into that group, and you now are not able to transfer to another group. Is that helpful?
Another time to understand what actually, what we know what registering something means today, but I'm just wondering the process. It's obviously takes us off, and perhaps it's a different thing. But I'm curious to know what does it mean to register, and how and when and how.
Amongst your family, I would imagine. So if you're expecting Dan and Leora to be with you for Yom Tov, right? So then they would have had to express that they were going to be doing that. If you'd gone and sacrificed your Korban Pesach, Dan and Leora would not now last minute be able to say, "Oh, actually, we're going to go to spend Yom Tov with the Seligmans and eat their Korban Pesach." So it was done verbally. It wasn't something that the Beis Hamikdash needed to be aware of. It was something that family units or the Chabura would need to be aware of. And once you were locked in, you now can't go dipping into other Korban Pesachs or start switching out to move to another one. But if it was before the sacrifice had been done, then you'd be able to declare or state which Korban Pesach you were going to be eating from, and you would be allowed to change that before the sacrifice. So I hope that helps. If not, go and ask a real rabbi. So how do we know? From where do we know? Where is the source that you're violating a prohibition by switching from one chabura to another, or taking this meat out from one chabura to another? Tanya, because it's taught in the Braisa. So lo sotzi min habayis min habasar chutza. You shall not carry out any of the meat from the house to the outside. Okay. Well, that only tells me that I can't move the meat from one house to another. How do I know that I can't transfer from one group to another? They could be sitting in the same house. How do I know that I can't even transfer from one group to another? Talmud Loma, the pasuk had said chutza, to the outside, chutz la'achilasa, which means the Gemara learns out, it includes anything moving it outside of the place where it can be eaten. So you could be in the same house, but you're moving over to another chabura with it, and that is a problem. Amar Rabbi Yomi said, Hamotzi basar Pesach, one who takes out this meat of the Korban Pesach, mechabura lechabura, from one company to another, from one group to another, eino chayev ad sheyaniach. He's only going to be liable if he puts it down, similar to the halachas of hotza'ah on Shabbos. It operates in a similar way to transferring items on Shabbos. Let's just scroll down a little bit. Ma Shabbos ad da'avad akira v'anacha. In the same way that we saw back in Maseches Shabbos, that transferring an item from one domain to another required a person to la'akor, to do the akira, to lift it up, and to hanacha, and to then put it down in a different domain. Af hachinami, so to over here, ad da'avad akira v'anacha. It's going to require a person to lift up the meat of the Korban Pesach, take it over to another chabura, and to put it down. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yomi. Meisiv Rabbi Abba bar Mamul. Rabbi Abba bar Mamul says, Hayusov lino samba motos, if they were carrying them on poles or on staves, Harishonim yatsu chutz l'choma ha'azara, the first people could be going out of the confines of the Beis Hamikdash, for ha'acharonim lo yatsu, and the back people could not yet have gone through the threshold of the boundaries of the Beis Hamikdash. Harishonim etamim begadim, and so these first people could become impure, their garments could become impure. Va'acharonim ein metamim begadim, and the last people won't have contracted impurity in their clothes. V'halonach. But hang on a second, says Rabbi Abba bar Mamul. They have not put they've not put the item down. They've not put the korban down outside the confines of the Beis Hamikdash. So why all of a sudden are they becoming impure? He asked the question, but he also answered it, and he answered it to say benigrarin, that they are dragging this korban, and that is why as soon as they leave the threshold of the Beis Hamikdash, it would be considered to have been put down. So it would seem then perhaps that the halacha does stand. Rabbi Ami would say that you're only going to be violating this problem of transferring meat of the Korban Pesach from one group to another if it has had an akira and a hanacha, if it has been lifted up and it has been put down as well. So that then brings us to the end of that piece of Gemara. We reach another Mishnah. So we've already seen the wording from this Mishnah because we brought it as evidence before. So the Mishnah says, excuse me, if you have a limb that has partially gone beyond the permissible boundary, you have to cut through the flesh to reach the bone. And then you have to peel it back until you reach the joint, and then you can cut it off. And the reason we were saying, which we never actually articulated before, because you're cutting it at a joint, you're not breaking the bone, you're cutting it at a joint. Can't believe I never even mentioned that before. With Mukdashim, with regards to other sacrifices, kotzets with kofits, you can chop it off with a, does it translate it as a cleaver? Or is it with a hatchet? So you can cut it off even in the middle of the bone, because there is no prohibition of breaking the bones when it comes to other types of korbanos. So we've talked about how it has to, how things have to go through different thresholds before their status is changed. So the Mishnah finishes off with the following halacha: Min ha'agaf v'lifnim k'lifnim. If you were standing on the doorstep, but you were standing on the part of the doorstep that faces inside the threshold, then the halacha is going to say it's considered as if you are still inside. Mina agaf velachut. If you are on the doorstep, if you are on the threshold of the boundary, but you are on the side facing outside, kilachut, then it's going to be considered like you are already outside. So it would seem then that the agaf, which is the doorstep, if you can picture the way we have our door frames, so there's that space where the door frame sits. And part of that is going to be considered inside, and part of that is going to be considered outside, depending on how far through that threshold you might be. But when it comes to windows and the thickness of the window, and when it comes to the thickness of the wall, then kilifnim. Those are, if you are standing within that airspace, you're going to be considered as you are standing inside the threshold of that particular boundary. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said, quoting Rav, the same would apply for counting people in a minyan, according to Rav Yehuda quoting Rav. If you had 9 people standing inside shul, and you had one person standing on the threshold facing outwards, that person is not going to be considered as part of the minyan. But if they were standing on the threshold of the doorway facing inwards, then that person would be considered part of the minyan. Upligit to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. But Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi counters this. He disagrees strongly to Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, because as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi famously says, not even an iron curtain could get between the Jewish people and their Father in heaven. So when it comes to that particular detail of the threshold, standing in this open space, but perhaps not being far enough inside, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says that is not going to be enough to stop this person from joining with the prayers of the community. But now the Gemara asks, Hagufa Kashya, hang on a minute, this in itself is extremely difficult. Omar min ha'agaf v'lifnim kilifnim. That if you are standing in the doorstep and you are in the inner part, then it's going to be considered like you're inside. Ha'agaf atzmo kilachutz. That's going to indicate to us, and that's going to imply that the doorway itself is like the outside. But Ema Seifa min agaf lachutz kilachutz. But then you went on to say in the latter part of the Mishnah that if you are on the outer part of the threshold and outside, then it's like you're outside, which implies ha'agaf atzmo kilifnim, which implies that the doorpost itself is going to be considered as the inside. Lo kasha. So the Gemara answers this is not a problem. Kam b'shari azara, kam b'shari Yerushalayim. We're talking about 2 different types of thresholds. When it comes to the shari azara, when it comes to the gates of the courtyard, so then the inside of the doorways are going to be considered as if they are inside the Beis Hamikdash. But when it comes to the gates of Yerushalayim, then if you are standing inside the gates, it is still like you are outside of Yerushalayim, and that's going to play a part in where the threshold starts for the ability to become impure or the ability to transfer impurity. Okay, what parts of Yerushalayim, what parts of the Beis Hamikdash had the higher expectations of sanctity? So the Gemara continues. The Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, said, "Mipnei ma lo niskadashu shara Yerushalayim." Why did the gates of Yerushalayim not receive a sanctified status? Meaning that if you were standing within the threshold of these gates, you're still considered to be outside Yerushalayim. Why did it not absorb the status of sanctity as being inside Yerushalayim? Mipnei shemitzorayin meginin tachtehem b'chama mipnei achama u'b'gsham mipnei agsham, because the gates of Yerushalayim served as a place of shelter for mitzorayin, for lepers who were impure. They would want to be able to protect themselves in the summer because of the heat, and in the rainy season because of the rain. They would use the gates of Yerushalayim as a place to take shelter. So if the gates of Yerushalayim were to be given this status of kedusha, it would mean that these lepers would not be allowed to take refuge. So as a chesed to these mitzoraim, it was decreed that the kedusha would not extend to the threshold, to the sheltered part of the gates of Yerushalayim. V'amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, and Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak also said, "Mipnei ma lo niskadash Shar Nikanor." Why was Shar Nikanor, which was on the... I don't have my map. What's it? Shar Nikanor, which was named after the guy who donated these gates. Okay, so Shar Nikanor, if you picture in your brains the Beis Hamikdash in a bird's eye view, so Shar Nikanor are these gates here, right in the middle, right as you go into the courtyard where the altar was, and then ultimately the Heichal, and then this is the Ezras Nashim. So these gates here, the Shar Nikanor at the top of the steps, why did these gates not receive the extra level of sanctity? And the answer the Gemara brings, Mipnei shemitzorayin omdim sham machnisin bohonos yadam. When the lepers, when the mitzorayin were coming to be purified, they would have to be able to stand in a place and stick their thumb inside these gates, so that they could undergo the purification procedure with the Kohanim. The Kohanim would have to put, was it blood on their thumbs? Yeah, from the dam. They'd have to put blood on the thumb of the Metzora as part of the purification process. So if you were to, you had to have a point at which they could reasonably do this without violating the sanctity or the additional sanctity of the inner parts of the Beis Hamikdash. So that is why the threshold of the gate of Nikanor was not given this high level of sanctity, so that the Mitzoraim would be able to stick their thumbs in and undergo their purification procedure. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all we have time for today. So we're going to wish everybody a wonderful day. We're going to wish everybody continued success and ability to understand these complex pieces of Gemara. And all I will say is, guys, we're getting ever closer to the more familiar chapter 10 of Maseches Pesachim, which is all about the actual Seder. So I realize that some of this stuff is so obscure, some of it is so difficult, a lot of concepts that we're not so familiar with. But that's why we keep going through it, because the more we keep going through it, the more we will eventually start to become more exposed to these ideas and these concepts, and it will become more familiar to us. And what I'll also say is, again, the Mishnayos class that we do, especially as we approach the end of Moed now and about to start dealing with sacrifices, whether you can tune in live or just catch it on YouTube afterwards, you will see more and more. You will see more and more that the concepts start to come alive, and we start to weave and become more exposed to all of these different concepts. It starts to become a bit more familiar. So yeah, with that in mind, everybody, have a wonderful and meaningful day.
Very much.